Trump destroys, Schumer's FAA lies, Part 1. The confrontation. The air inside the White House press briefing room was electric. Rows of reporters sat stiffly, their hands gripping pens and recorders, eyes locked on the empty podium. The hum of whispered conversations and the rapid clicking of cameras filled the space. They all knew something big was coming. They weren't here for the usual policy updates or diplomatic briefings. They were here because Donald J. Trump was about to walk onto that stage, and whenever Trump stepped up to a microphone, fireworks were guaranteed. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell to stay updated on all our latest videos. At the center of the storm was Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader and a longtime political rival of Trump. Schumer had been all over the media, blaming Trump's administration for aviation safety concerns and accusing him of recklessly cutting FAA funding. The headlines had been brutal. Schumer slams Trump for jeopardizing airline safety. Trump's FAA layoffs creating dangerous skies. Schumer warns. Democrats sound the alarm. Is Trump making flying unsafe? The narrative was set. The blame game had begun. Now it was Trump's turn to respond. The room stilled as the doors swung open. Trump strode in with his signature confidence, his bright red tie swinging slightly as he approached the podium. Behind him, a massive screen was already displaying charts, data, and headlines. But more importantly, it showed Schumer's face, frozen mid-sentence in one of his press appearances. Trump adjusted the microphone, scanned the room, and smirked. "Well, well, well," he said, spreading his hands. "Here we go again." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. Trump's tone was light, almost playful, but anyone who knew him understood that this was just the calm before the storm. He leaned forward. "So today we're talking about airplanes. We're talking about Chuck Schumer, and of course we're talking about fake news." The first shot had been fired. Caitlin Collins from CNN wasted no time. She leaned forward, microphone raised, ready to attack. "Mr. President, with multiple aviation incidents happening recently, do you take responsibility? Has your administration's budget cuts to the FAA weakened airline safety?" The words hung in the air like a loaded gun. Trump's smirk widened. He loved when they made it easy for him. "Wow, Caitlin, that's a very dishonest question, but I expect that from CNN." Some reporters rolled their eyes. Others scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Trump continued, gesturing to the screen behind him. "You see this? This is Chuck Schumer doing what Chuck Schumer does best. Lying. He's out there acting like I personally went into the FAA and started firing people left and right. It's ridiculous. It's nonsense. But of course, you guys love it." He tapped the podium. "So let's break it down, shall we?" The screen flickered, switching to a timeline of FAA staffing changes. Trump pointed at it. "We have 45,000 employees at the FAA. We made minor adjustments, less than 400 people, all probationary, all non-essential. None of them were air traffic controllers. None of them were critical safety inspectors. So tell me, Caitlin, how exactly does that crash an airplane?" Caitlin opened her mouth to respond, but Trump wasn't done. He turned to the audience. "You see, this is what they do. They take a completely normal policy adjustment, slap on a scary headline, and suddenly it's the apocalypse." The crowd murmured. Some reporters exchanged nervous glances. Trump was controlling the room. Jim Acosta from MSNBC jumped in. "But Mr. President, Senator Schumer specifically pointed to your FAA cuts as dangerous. Doesn't that concern you?" Trump chuckled. "Jim, let me tell you something about Chuck Schumer. He's been in Washington for 40 years. 40 years. And in all that time, do you know how many times he's actually fixed something? 0. The audience reacted. Some reporters smirked. Others furiously typed on their laptops. Trump waved a hand. "Chuck Schumer talks. That's all he does. He goes on TV, he points fingers, and then he goes back to his fancy office and does nothing. And now he's blaming me for aviation problems? Give me a break." The screen changed again, showing an old clip of Schumer discussing aviation safety during the Biden administration. Trump gestured at it. Where was Chuck Schumer when Pete Buttigieg was ignoring air traffic controller shortages? Where was he when Biden let the FAA run on outdated systems? Nowhere. silent. But the second I start fixing things, suddenly it's a crisis. Interesting, isn't it? A few reporters whispered among themselves. The narrative was shifting. April Ryan from ABC tried next. So you're denying there's an increase in aviation accidents under your administration? Trump sighed dramatically. April, you've been in this room a long time. You should know better. The screen flickered again, now showing FAA safety statistics from last year and this year. Trump pointed at the numbers. Look at this. January and February, fewer incidents than the same period last year. But you don't hear that on the news, do you? No, because that doesn't fit the narrative. He leaned in. Let me make this really simple. There is no crisis. The only thing crashing and burning is the credibility of the fake news media. The audience erupted. Some reporters were visibly frustrated, while others typed frantically. Trump folded his arms. Now, I could stand here all day and debunk these lies, but honestly, it's exhausting. So let me just ask one simple question. If Schumer really cared about airline safety, why didn't he do something about it before? Silence. Trump waited. Nothing. He nodded. Exactly, because this isn't about safety. It's about politics. It's about headlines. It's about Democrats being desperate because they know they're losing. Then he smirked. But hey, keep going. Keep pushing your fake stories because guess what? The American people aren't buying it anymore. The press room erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted questions, camera lights flashed, and Trump simply stepped back from the podium, letting the storm unfold around him. He had won this round, and he knew it. The White House press room was buzzing. Trump had dominated the opening round, tearing apart the media's narrative with his signature mix of facts, bravado, and sarcasm. The reporters were still reeling, but they weren't ready to back down yet, and neither was Chuck Schumer. Somewhere in the Capitol, Schumer was watching. He had spent decades mastering the art of political counterattacks, and there was no way he would let Trump walk away with an easy win. Within minutes, his team leaked a response to the press. A statement blazed across phone screens in the hands of eager journalists. Trump is lying about FAA safety. The truth is simple. He gutted aviation funding, and now Americans are at risk. If he won't take responsibility, then we will. The press room erupted. More questions flew at Trump like bullets in a firefight. Jim Acosta, always eager for a fight, shot up. Mr. President, Schumer just released a statement calling your claims false. He says your administration did cut FAA funding and that it is impacting safety. How do you respond? Trump sighed loudly, shaking his head. Jim, you're like a broken record. I already answered this. He turned to the massive screen behind him, where a new slide popped up. FAA budget. No significant cuts to safety operations. Air traffic controllers, no layoffs. Schumer false claims. 100% political theater. Trump pointed at the numbers. Look at this, folks. Do you see anywhere on this list where we gutted FAA safety funding? No, because it didn't happen. He turned back to the press. Schumer knows it. The media knows it. But hey, lying gets more clicks, right? A few reporters muttered, shifting in their seats. April Ryan tried again. But Mr. President, isn't it fair to say that even if you didn't directly cut safety funding, changes in your budget have affected FAA operations? Trump tilted his head, pretending to consider it. You know, that's an interesting point, April. So let's talk about Schumer's record on aviation. The screen flickered again, revealing a clip from 2019. Schumer standing at a podium, passionately talking about the need for FAA reform. The FAA has outdated systems, an air traffic controller shortage, and needs immediate modernization. Trump grinned. You hear that? Chuck Schumer himself admitting there were problems before I even took office. The press stayed silent. Trump pushed forward. So here's the real question. If Schumer cared so much about aviation safety, why didn't he fix it when his guy was in the White House? Why didn't he demand Buttigieg do something? Why is this suddenly a crisis now that I'm back? Silence. Trump leaned in, voice lowering for emphasis. Because it was never about safety. It was always about politics, the audience murmured. Some reporters flipped through their notes, realizing Trump had just flipped the entire conversation back onto Schumer. Caitlin Collins wasn't giving up. But Mr. President, Even if Schumer failed in the past, does that excuse your administration's handling of aviation now? Trump chuckled. Caitlin, you're really stretching here. He tapped the podium. My administration is already fixing the problem. More FAA hires, new safety initiatives, upgraded systems. We're actually doing what Schumer just talks about. He gestured broadly. That's the difference. He talks, I act. He complains, I solve. The audience reacted. Some reporters looked visibly frustrated. Trump had once again taken control. Trump looked around, then sighed dramatically. Look, we can do this all day. The media will keep pushing Schumer's talking points, and I'll keep proving them wrong. He folded his arms. But here's the bottom line. The only thing crashing in this country is the credibility of the fake news and the Democrats. The press room erupted again. Shouting, camera flashes, and frantic typing filled the air as Trump stepped back from the podium, smirking. He had just won another round, and he knew it. The White House press briefing descended into chaos. Reporters shouted over one another, cameras flashed wildly, and frantic keystrokes filled the air as journalists rushed to get their headlines out. Trump had just obliterated Schumer's narrative in real time, exposing the hypocrisy, the lies, and the media's desperate attempts to cover for him. But Schumer wasn't done. While Trump stood at the podium smirking, a new development hit the press room like a grenade. A CNN reporter's phone buzzed violently, then others and others. Chuck Schumer had just gone live on national television, holding a surprise press conference outside the Capitol. His voice boomed over the speakers as networks cut away from the White House briefing. The American people deserve better than Donald Trump's reckless mismanagement of aviation safety. We will not allow him to endanger lives with his disastrous FAA cuts. That's why I am calling for an immediate congressional investigation into Trump's budget decisions regarding airline safety. The press room erupted again. Trump blinked, then let out a low, amused chuckle. Wow, that was fast. He turned back to the reporters. You see what's happening here, folks? I'm still standing at the podium, and Chuck is already running to the cameras to save face. He got caught lying, and instead of admitting it, he's doubling down. Typical. Jim Acosta, emboldened by Schumer's sudden offensive, jumped in. Mr. President, Schumer just announced a congressional investigation into your FAA budget. Do you take this seriously? Trump raised an eyebrow. Jim, I take a lot of things seriously. Chuck Schumer? Not one of them. The audience laughed, but Acosta pushed forward. But Mr. President, isn't this a sign that Democrats are concerned about aviation safety? Trump leaned forward, voice dropping into a mock whisper. Jim, let me tell you a little secret. Democrats aren't concerned about anything except one thing. Power. He straightened up. This isn't about safety. It's about politics. It's about Schumer trying to create a scandal out of thin air because they know the election is coming, and they have nothing else to run on. April Ryan interjected, but an investigation into FAA cuts. Shouldn't the American people be concerned? Trump snorted. Concerned about what? Fewer incidents, better hiring, improved safety measures? Because that's what's actually happening. He gestured toward the massive screen where a new chart appeared, showing aviation safety statistics from the last 5 years. The room stilled. Trump pointed at the graph. Look at these numbers. Aviation incidents are lower now than they were under Biden. But you don't hear that on CNN, do you? A few reporters muttered quietly, eyes darting between their notes and the data on the screen. Trump smirked. Schumer's out there screaming about dangerous skies, but the numbers say the skies are safer now than before. So either Schumer can't read or he's lying. Maybe both. Laughter rippled through the room, but some reporters were visibly uneasy because they knew Trump was right. Caitlin Collins tried again. Mr. President, you keep deflecting to Schumer's pass, but the fact remains your budget did adjust FAA staffing. Trump sighed theatrically. All right, Caitlin, let's do this. Let's talk about Schumer's past since you brought it up. The screen flickered again, this time showing a video clip from 2016. Schumer was standing in front of a crowd, talking about the dire need to modernize the FAA. We must take immediate action to upgrade our air traffic control systems and ensure that FAA staffing remains strong. Trump paused the clip. He turned to the audience. That was 7 years ago. Do you know what he did after this speech? Silence. Trump answered for them. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. He pointed at the press. The same guy who is now pretending to be the aviation safety champion sat on his hands for years while the FAA remained outdated. And now that I'm actually fixing it, he's suddenly an expert? Give me a break. The reporters shifted uncomfortably. Schumer's record was indefensible, and they knew it. NBC's Kristen Welker, trying a different angle, spoke up. Mr. President, if Schumer is wrong, why do so many experts agree with his concerns? Trump grinned. Oh, you mean experts like Pete Buttigieg? The screen changed again, now showing a headline from 2022. FAA faces crisis as Secretary Buttigieg fails to address air traffic controller shortages. Trump pointed at it. This guy was in charge for 4 years and did nothing. Now he's suddenly concerned. Please. He turned back to the press. The truth is simple. The FAA needed fixing, and I'm fixing it. And Schumer and his friends in the media hate that because it ruins their election strategy. The room went silent. Trump leaned in, delivering the final blow. Schumer can investigate all he wants. He can cry on CNN, hold as many press conferences as he likes. But guess what? The facts aren't on his side. He folded his arms, and you know it. The press room erupted again, but Trump was done. He gave a small wave, stepped back from the podium, and turned to leave. As he walked out, he could hear the reporters still shouting questions, their words lost in the frenzy. But it didn't matter because he had already won. The battle was far from over. Trump had steamrolled the media and exposed Schumer's hypocrisy at the White House press briefing. But Schumer wasn't the kind of politician to take public humiliation lightly. If he couldn't beat Trump in a war of words, he would weaponize Congress against him. Within 24 hours, Schumer had rallied top Democrats in the Senate and announced an official hearing on Trump's FAA failures. The headlines exploded. Schumer demands answers on Trump's FAA cuts. Senate to hold emergency hearing on airline safety. Trump's budget under investigation. Is flying becoming more dangerous? Cable news networks ran wall-to-wall coverage, inviting experts to warn about the looming aviation crisis, the same one Trump had already debunked. Schumer had played his next move, and now the fight was heading to Capitol Hill. The hearing room was packed. Senators lined the long table, their nameplates gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Reporters filled the press section, cameras ready to capture every moment. At the center of it all sat Chuck Schumer, wearing his trademark glasses and a look of self-righteous determination. To his left, Senator Elizabeth Warren nodded in agreement. To his right, Senator Bernie Sanders leaned back, arms crossed. They were prepared to attack. Across from them, Trump's Secretary of Transportation, Duffy, sat coolly, his expression unreadable. He had been sent to defend the administration, knowing full well that this was nothing more than a political ambush. Schumer adjusted his glasses and leaned into the microphone. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here today. I'd like to start by asking a simple question. He paused dramatically. Why did the Trump administration decide to cut FAA personnel while airline safety was already in decline? A murmur rippled through the room. The trap was set, but Duffy didn't flinch. Senator, with all due respect, that's not what happened. Schumer raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. Oh? Enlighten us then. Duffy flipped through his notes, then gestured to the staff behind him. A large screen lit up, displaying a graph labeled FAA Staffing and Safety Incidents, 2019 to 2025. The chart showed a clear trend. FAA staffing remained steady, while safety incidents had actually declined under Trump's administration. Duffy pointed at the numbers. There were no mass layoffs. There were no critical safety reductions. The facts simply don't support the crisis narrative that's been pushed in the media. The room fell silent. Even Schumer looked momentarily caught off guard. But Schumer wasn't about to back down. He quickly shuffled his papers and leaned forward again. Mr. Secretary, while those numbers may look good on paper, they don't reflect the reality of what's happening on the ground. Can you honestly tell the American people that airline safety isn't worse today than it was before? Duffy smirked. Actually, I can, because it's true. The screen changed again, now showing FAA inspection reports from the past year. FAA oversight is at an all-time high. Our air traffic control systems are being modernized. We're addressing issues that the previous administration ignored for years. Schumer's jaw tightened. The press section buzzed, reporters whispering among themselves. This wasn't going as planned. Elizabeth Warren jumped in, hoping to regain control. Mr. Secretary, let's cut through the political spin. If everything is going so well, why are pilots and airline workers raising concerns? Duffy turned to her. Senator, I think we both know why. The unions backing your party have a political interest in stirring up controversy. A few gasps came from the room. Warren's face twitched in frustration. Duffy continued. Let's be real. If Trump's name weren't attached to this issue, we wouldn't be sitting here today. This hearing isn't about aviation safety. It's about creating a headline. The press erupted again, cameras flashing wildly. Schumer's team scrambled, trying to regain footing. Schumer pushed his microphone forward again, voice sharp. So you're saying this is all a conspiracy? That the American people shouldn't trust experts raising concerns? Duffy didn't hesitate. I'm saying the American people should trust the facts, not political theater. Boom. The tension in the room was suffocating. Meanwhile, back at the White House, Trump watched everything unfold on a massive TV screen in the West Wing. He chuckled. Duffy was holding the line beautifully. His phone buzzed. A text from an aide. Schumer is struggling. Should we respond? Trump smirked and typed back, "Oh, I'm responding. Get the press ready." Minutes later, Trump marched into the White House press briefing room, cameras flashing as reporters rushed to their seats. He stepped up to the podium, arms folded, and grinned. Well, folks, it looks like Chuck had a rough morning. Laughter rippled through the room. I just watched the hearing. You saw it. A total disaster for the Democrats. They tried to spin another hoax, and they got crushed by the facts. The reporters hurriedly typed, trying to keep up. Trump held up a paper, Schumer's original press statement blaming him for FAA safety issues. He ripped it in half. The press gasped. This is what I think of Chuck Schumer's investigation. It's garbage. It's fake news. And the American people know it. The cameras exploded with flashes. Trump leaned into the microphone for one last jab. Chuck, if you're watching, you might want to find a new hobby because this one, it's not working out for you. He turned and walked off, leaving the press in total chaos. Schumer had played his hand, and Trump had just called his bluff. Chuck Schumer was furious. His big Senate hearing, meant to publicly humiliate Trump, had completely backfired. Instead of exposing Trump's supposed aviation failures, it had turned into a disaster for Democrats. The facts were on Trump's side, and now Trump had torn Schumer's narrative apart on live television, even ripping Schumer's statement in half like it was nothing. The media scrambled to regain control. Within minutes, CNN, MSNBC, and the Washington Post were frantically spinning the story. Trump knocks Schumer instead of addressing real FAA concerns. Experts still warn of aviation safety issues. Despite Trump's dismissal, Trump's White House turned Senate hearing into a circus. But it wasn't sticking. The American people weren't buying it. Polls showed that support for Schumer's FAA investigation had plummeted. Even some moderate Democrats distanced themselves from it, calling it a political stunt gone wrong. Schumer needed a new angle, and he needed it fast. That night, Schumer called an emergency meeting with top Democratic strategists. We can't let Trump win this, he growled, pacing the room. If we don't change the narrative, he's going to walk away unscathed. One of his advisors hesitated before speaking. Senator, maybe it's time we escalate. Schumer stopped pacing. What do you mean? The advisor slid a file across the table. Inside was a confidential whistleblower complaint, an anonymous FAA employee claiming that Trump's budget changes had secretly weakened air traffic control operations. No evidence, no proof, just an accusation. Schumer's eyes narrowed. He knew exactly what this was, a last-minute smear job. But at this point, he didn't care. By the next morning, the mainstream media was on fire. CNN had exclusive coverage of the whistleblower report, with dramatic headlines flashing across the screen. Bombshell FAA insider claims Trump's cuts have created dangerous skies. Exclusive, aviation whistleblower speaks out against Trump's reckless policies. MSNBC pushed the hysteria further, bringing on a panel of so-called experts to warn that Trump's decisions could lead to disaster. Schumer immediately held a press conference, standing before a line of grim-faced Democratic senators. "This is exactly what we feared," Schumer said, shaking his head. "We now have an FAA insider confirming what we've been saying all along. Trump's policies are putting Americans at risk." The press ate it up. The trap was set. Now all they had to do was wait for Trump to fall into it. The media expected Trump to go on the defensive, scrambling to explain himself. Instead, he did the opposite. Just hours after Schumer's press conference, Trump walked back into the White House briefing room, a folder in his hand and a grin on his face. He stepped up to the podium, flipped open the folder and said, "Well, folks, I just read this so-called whistleblower complaint, and guess what? It's a total joke." The reporters froze. Trump smirked, tapping the folder. "I've seen bad smear jobs before, but this one? This is embarrassing. No names, no real evidence. Just some vague claims from an anonymous source who, surprise, surprise, has connections to Democratic donors." Gasps rippled through the room. Trump continued, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let's be honest. This isn't about safety. This is about Chuck Schumer trying to save face after his Senate hearing crashed and burned." He glanced at the reporters. "And you guys? You fell for it." Again. A few reporters visibly winced. Trump held up the supposed whistleblower report and did something no one expected. He ripped it in half. Again. The room erupted. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed, news alerts exploded across social media. But Trump wasn't finished. He leaned in, voice deadly serious. "Chuck, I know you're watching this, so let me tell you something. No matter how many fake scandals you create, no matter how many lies you push, it won't work." He let that hang in the air. Then with a small smirk, he added, "See you at the next election." And with that, Trump turned and walked out, leaving the media and Schumer in total chaos.